Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Welcome back, everyone, to the old coffee shop at the corner of nowhere and somewhere. Recently, I realized I have not been getting enough fiber, so I cooked up a new menu item here, a fiber-only bagel that offers 40 grams of fiber in a single serving. Rest in peace, intestines everywhere. By the way, after today's stories, you're gonna want a security guard at your house, because these stories are terrifying. And they're stories about security guards who looked after abandoned places and witnessed the downright terrifying. Now it's time for my break and time for some stories. If you have a terrifying work story, I want to hear it. Send it to me at eriecast.com/submit. These are tales from the break room. Shadows in the Halls, from Nightwatcher 23. I work as a security guard. I've taken on contracts that range from the mundane to the downright eerie. The agency I work with specializes in safeguarding properties that are in limbo, places waiting to be sold, demolished, or renovated. About 2 years ago, I was assigned to watch over an abandoned apartment complex at the edge of town. For 8 long months, I patrolled its decaying corridors and empty rooms, and what I experienced there still haunts me. The complex was a sprawling 4-building maze. Each structure was 4 stories high, with interconnected hallways and stairwells. Vines crawled up the cracked walls and graffiti adorned nearly every surface. My partner on the assignment was this older guard named Bill. He was in his late 50s, with graying hair and a stoic demeanor. We worked 12-hour shifts, alternating nights and days every 2 weeks. Bill preferred the night shifts himself, saying they were quieter and allowed him time to think. On my first day, I met Bill at the security office, a small, cluttered room filled with outdated monitors and a distinct smell of stale coffee. "Welcome to the new post, I guess," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Hope you don't scare easy." I chuckled nervously. "Why's that?" He shrugged. "Old buildings make strange noises. Plays tricks on the mind if you're not careful." I nodded, dismissing his comment as the standard newbie hazing. The first few weeks were uneventful. Our main job was to prevent squatters and vandals from causing more damage. Occasionally, we would chase off a group of teenagers, looking for a place to party or explore. Bill and I would take turns doing rounds, each covering different sections of the complex. But then the first incident happened. It was a late afternoon during one of my solo rounds. I was on the 3rd floor of Building B when I heard it. A faint sound of laughter echoing down the hallway. It was subtle, almost childlike. I stopped and listened for a moment, thinking some kids had snuck in. "Hello?" I called out, receiving no response. I proceeded cautiously, checking each room as I went. The laughter seemed to fade the closer I got to it, leading me deeper into the building. Finally, I reached a room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I found an empty apartment, all the dust apparent from the sunlight beaming through the windows. The laughter, by then, had stopped. As I turned to leave, a shadow flickered in my peripheral vision. I spun around, but I saw nothing, just peeling wallpaper and debris. But I did get a chill. I decided to end my round early and headed back to the security office. When I got back, Bill saw me and immediately asked, "Everything all right?" "Yeah, just thought I heard something," I replied, trying to sound casual. He gave me a knowing look, not going back to his crossword puzzle just yet. "Didn't happen to be some, laughter, did it?" I paused. "You've heard it before?" "Yep, comes and goes. Part of the charm of this place." I wanted to ask him more about it, but he shifted his attention back to his puzzle, and I felt if I pressed the topic, I would sound scared or ignorant. The second incident happened about a month later, during a night shift. Bill had taken the evening off, so I was alone. Around midnight, I was monitoring the security cameras when I noticed movement on one of the screens. In the lobby of Building D, a figure stood just outside the entrance. Looked like a woman in a long tattered dress, dark hair obscuring her face. I grabbed my flashlight and headed over, thinking someone might need some help. As I approached the lobby, the air grew cold. In fact, my breath began to fog in front of me, even though it was supposed to be a warm night. "Ma'am, do you need some assistance?" I called out to her. She didn't reply to me. Instead, I saw her turn slowly, walking deeper into the building. I quickened my pace to catch up to her, but when I entered the lobby, it was empty. The only sound was the echo of footsteps on the cracked tiles. My footsteps. I searched the immediate area, but I didn't find her. Returning to the security office, I rewound the camera footage. There she was, standing still for several minutes before moving out of frame. I couldn't really explain what she was doing. When Bill entered the next day, I told him about it. He sighed heavily. "That, my friend, is the lady of Building D." "You gotta be kidding me." I was starting to feel creeped out and frustrated. He shook his head. "Wish I was. She's been seen by a few guards over the years. Always the same description." "Well, do you know who she is?" "No one knows. Some say she was a resident who died here under unpleasant circumstances." I sat back, trying to process everything he was telling me. Why didn't you tell me about it? Would it have made a difference? With these kinds of things, sometimes it's better to let people experience them first. I guess it made sense. If I had not experienced it myself first thing, and was simply warned about it, I probably would have laughed it off. The third incident was by far the worst. It was another solo night shift. Around 3 a.m., the security monitors began to flicker. Static filled the screens, obscuring the already grainy footage. Then, all at once, the screens went black. The lights in the office dimmed too, and the hum of the electricity faded. Power outage. I radioed Bill, forgetting he wasn't on the shift. I cursed under my breath when I did remember. I then grabbed my flashlight and headed to the maintenance room in Building A to check the circuit breakers. The hallways seemed darker than usual. The beam of my flashlight barely penetrated the thick shadows. As I descended the stairs to the basement, the air became damp and heavy. I could smell mildew strongly in there. Reaching the maintenance room, I found the door ajar. That's weird, I thought. This room was always kept locked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was a mess. There were tools scattered everywhere across the floor. Panels were opened up, wires were hanging loosely, which in itself was quite dangerous. No sane person would have left it that way. As I came to the main breaker, something moved behind me. I spun around in an instant, shining my light across the room. In the corner, I saw a figure. Plain as day, I could see him. A tall man wearing outdated maintenance overalls. His face was obscured by the dark. "Hey, you can't be in here," I shouted. He didn't move or respond in any way. Taking a cautious step forward, I kept the light trained on him. "Do you work here?" Silence. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into complete darkness, as even my flashlight flickered and died. Right away, I began to panic. I fumbled with the malfunctioning flashlight, tapping it in hopes of reviving the beam. But then a low whisper filled the room. It was indecipherable, but horrific. The hairs on my arms stood up. I backed up against the wall, my heart pounding. Then, just as abruptly as it failed, the flashlight flickered back to life. The room was empty now. The figure that was standing right there was gone. I didn't waste a second. I flipped on the main breaker, restoring power to the complex, and hurried back to the security office. The monitors were back online, but now every screen showed the same thing. The lobby of every building, with figures standing motionless in the center. Men, women, even children. It happened for just a second, because when I blinked, they were gone. The screens were all back to their normal feeds, with every room looking completely normal. When Bill came back the next morning, I told him everything. He listened quietly before speaking. "I've seen things like that too. These spirits, echoes, or whatever you want to call them." "Bill, why do you stay here? Why do you work in a place like this?" He thought for a moment, then replied, "Everybody has their reasons. I guess, to be honest with you, I feel a responsibility to the place. Or maybe at this point I'm too old to care." I handed in my notice that day, requesting to be reassigned as soon as possible. The agency did oblige, and within a week, I was posted somewhere else, a modern office building downtown. On my last day at the complex, as I was packing up, Bill approached. "Take care of yourself," he said, extending a hand. "You too. Be safe." I shook his hand. He smiled. "Don't worry about me. I like to think that they know me pretty well by now." I left that abandoned complex behind. I've taken on many assignments since then, but none have been as creepy as that old apartment complex. I guess some places are just like that, repositories of forgotten stories and restless spirits. Menace of the Mountains, from Watchful Wanderer. Hello everyone, longtime security guard here. This is a bizarre story, and I wanted to share it with you. It's something that I can never forget. After a long stint working security in the city, I wanted a change of scenery. An opportunity arose to watch over an old resort tucked away in the mountains, and I jumped at it. The resort had been closed for a while. It initially closed due to declining tourism and harsh winters, which made maintenance a nightmare. Sounded to me like it was destined to close, but it was a nice place in a desolate kind of way. Snow-capped peaks surrounded the valley, and the resort itself was a sprawling structure of wood and stone. Old, but seemingly well built and still strong. My job was straightforward. Keep an eye on the property, get any trespassers out. As far as I knew, there were no plans for the place just yet. But if I was watching over it, maybe there was something down the pipeline. I would be alone there during my shifts. I'd split my time between patrolling the grounds and staying in a small security cabin near the entrance. This kind of silence was comforting for me. Occasionally, I would spot some wildlife, like deer or foxes, even a lone wolf trotting along the tree line. The snow-covered landscape was like something out of a postcard. One evening, as the sun was setting, I decided on a final round before settling in for the night. The air was quite crisp, and the fresh snow was crunching under my boots. As I walked past the main lodge, something caught my eye. There was a glint of metal near one of the side entrances. Curious, I approached and found a thin wire strung across the doorway at ankle height. It was connected to a rusty tin can filled with rocks, set to clatter down loudly if triggered. It looked like some sort of crude alarm system. I thought maybe the previous guard had set it up and forgot to mention it. Still, it seemed weird. I hadn't seen any signs of anyone else around so far. The next morning, I called the company. "Did the last guard set up any alarms or traps around the property?" I asked them. They seemed puzzled, though. No, you're the first guard we've had out there in months." A nagging feeling began to tell me something was wrong. A few nights after that, while making my rounds, I felt a sharp sting on my cheek. I reached up, and I found a thin wire strung across the hallway at face level. It had cut me just below the eye. Following the wire, I discovered a makeshift contraption. A piece of broken glass tied to the end, ready to swing down like a pendulum. This wasn't a harmless alarm. This was a trap. I contacted the local sheriff's office right away. "There appears to be someone setting dangerous traps inside the resort," I explained. They said they would send someone to check it out, but from the sounds of it, I wasn't sure they were taking this seriously. That night, I decided to do a thorough sweep of the property myself. In hindsight, going alone wasn't the best idea. I headed toward the old guest cottages on the outskirts of the resort. The moon was full that night, and my breath formed clouds in the cold air. As I made my way to the first cottage, I noticed footprints leading inside. Fresh footprints that had not been there earlier. I gripped my flashlight tighter and pushed the door open. Inside, the place was a mess with furniture overturned and trash scattered about. In the corner, I saw a small shrine made of sticks and stones with a photograph pinned to it. I couldn't breathe when I saw what that photo was of. It was a picture of me, taken recently, and I was very clearly unaware in the photo. Who did this? A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, but no one was there.
"Shouldn't be here."
I heard a voice from somewhere. I turned around, trying to find this intruder. "Who's there?" I demanded. No response just yet. I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the room. Suddenly, a figure lunged at me from the darkness on my left. I glimpsed wild eyes and matted hair before I was knocked to the ground. I struggled with this person, rolling across the dusty floor. He was surprisingly strong. He swung a makeshift club at me, but I managed to avoid it. The weapon smashed into the floorboards instead. "Stop it!" I shouted. "I'm just the security guard." The wild man snarled at me.
"This is my home. You won't take it from me."
I realized this wasn't your average squatter. This man was unhinged. I mustered my strength and pushed him off of me, bolting for the door. I ran into the night, and behind me I could hear his footsteps crunching in the snow. I ran straight for the security cabin. If I could get inside and just lock the door. But as I neared the cabin, my foot caught on something. I fell hard. The wind knocked out of me. Looking back, I saw I'd tripped over another wire. Pain shot through my leg. Reaching down, my hand came away wet with blood. I'd been cut by a concealed blade. The man was catching up with me, a twisted grin on his face.
"You shouldn't be here."
I scrambled to my feet, limping toward the cabin. Just as he closed in, headlights swept over the place. "Hey, what's going on here?" a voice shouted. It was one of the deputies, finally responding to my call. The hermit paused, eyes darting between me and the approaching vehicle. Then, with surprising speed, he vanished into the tree line. The deputy rushed over to me. "You all right?" he asked. "I think so. Careful, the guy's been setting traps all over the place." "Let's get you inside," he said, helping me to the cabin. Once safely indoors, we tended to my wound. It was a deep gash, but not life-threatening. "We gotta find this guy," I insisted. "I've got backup on the way," he assured me. Over the next few hours, authorities combed the area. They found several more traps, some deadly, others meant to injure. But they didn't find the hermit. "Looks like he's gone," the sheriff said later. "We'll keep a close eye out, but these woods are big." Weeks went by. New traps stopped appearing. There were no further sightings, but the unease lingered. Was he truly gone? I couldn't be sure. If he was gone, what if there was a dangerous trap I hadn't found yet? One that could be the end of me. I stayed cautious, trying to keep a close eye on my surroundings every time I stepped. I never could shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere in those mountains, watching me. He was obsessed with the place, the way he talked. So why would he just be chased away one time? Maybe he was just that crazy. Thankfully for me, I was randomly offered a reassignment, and I took it. Months after that, the resort was demolished. These encounters have really proved to me how disturbed human beings can be. Being directly attacked by a man who's deranged is terrifying. But there's something even more sinister about having to work and walk through a place where hidden deadly traps awaited me, like I was a rat in some sort of deadly maze. Needless to say, the change in scenery was not worth it. Whispers of the Old Station, from Lost Tracks 89. A few years back, I took a job that still gives me chills when I think about it. At the time, I was between gigs, and I had to have something to pay the bills. A security company hired me to watch over an old train station on the outskirts of our city. The place had been shut down for years, ever since the new Central Station opened downtown. The station was a relic from another era. Beautiful, though. It had those grand arches, ornate stonework, and a massive clock tower that hadn't ticked in decades. It was scheduled for demolition to make way for new developments, but until then they needed someone to keep an eye on it. Vandalism and theft was common around there. I would be working the night shift, from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. I wouldn't always be alone, though. There was another guard there named Martin. He'd been a guard for years, so he was much more experienced than me. On my first night, he showed me around, pointing out the areas that required extra attention. The homeless sometimes sneak in, he explained. Mostly harmless, just looking for a place to sleep. We usually let them be unless they cause some trouble. For a while, everything was just fine and dandy. We would patrol the vast empty halls. Occasionally, we would find someone curled up in a corner, usually leaving them alone, like Martin said. There was a sense of melancholy about the place. I could imagine the place used to be bustling, but now it's just an empty shell. One night, I noticed something strange. It was around midnight. I was doing my usual rounds alone, while Martin monitored the cameras. I was passing through the main concourse, and I realized I hadn't seen any of the regulars, the homeless folks who often sought shelter there. I decided to radio Martin. "Yo, have you noticed it's been quieter than usual?" "Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. Haven't seen anyone tonight." Weird. The night after that was the same. No one, just us. It felt eerie, but I tried not to dwell on it. A week later, things started to get unsettling. While making my way through one of the old waiting rooms, I spotted a man sitting on a bench, but he didn't look homeless. The man was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, complete with a vest and a pocket watch chain glinting under the dim lights. His polished shoes tapped lightly against the floor. "Excuse me, sir," I called out. "The station is closed. You can't be here." He looked up. He looked very confused. "Closed? My train is due any moment." I stepped closer, cautiously. "Are you okay? There haven't been trains here for years." He furrowed his brow. "No, that can't be right. I was just speaking with the ticket master." I looked around, hoping to spot Martin, but I was alone. Turning back to the man, I said to him, "Sir, perhaps you should come with me." He slowly stood up. "I must have dozed off. My apologies." As I escorted him towards the exit, he stopped. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" "The whistle. The train's coming." There was nothing but silence, though. "I think you might be imagining things," I said, trying to sound like I was joking. He shook his head, a hint of fear in his eyes. No, I have to go now. They're waiting for me." Before I could react, he turned and hurried back into the station, disappearing down a dark corridor. Of course, I chased after him, but the moment I reached that hallway, it was empty. There were no doors he could have entered there, no corners to hide behind. He was simply gone. I reported the incident to Martin. "Probably just some guy messing with you," he said. But his clothes were weird. They were from another time period. I mean, when was the last time you saw someone unironically wear a pocket watch chain? And he mentioned a Ticketmaster. Martin sighed. "Old place like this is bound to attract weirdos. Don't let it get to you." I tried to listen to him, but it was in fact getting to me. Over the next few nights, some other strange things happened. I encountered a woman in a vintage dress, standing at the defunct ticket booth. She was gently fanning herself. When I approached, she smiled and asked if I knew when the next train to Brighton was departing. Another time, a small group of children ran right past me, laughing and chasing each other. They were also dressed in old-fashioned clothes, old school uniforms. When I called out to them, they vanished around a corner. Despite my searching, I didn't find a trace of them. One particularly foggy night, I decided to confront Martin about it again. Something's not right with this place. I've been seeing people who shouldn't be here. That's part of the job. People shouldn't be here, so we have to get them out. That's not what I'm saying. These people, they look like they're from different time periods. Look, I've encountered a few people who were dressed weird too. It's odd, I believe you. But quit letting it get to your head. They're just normal people like you and I. Some weird pranksters or LARPers. Who knows? Trying to convince Martin that these were not normal people was like talking to a brick wall. I wasn't going to get through to him. But to be honest, I did feel a bit better knowing that he was seeing the same things I was, just reacting differently. From that night on, I approached my duties differently. Whenever I encountered something strange like this, I remained calm and took a detailed mental note of the experience. One evening, as I was doing some paperwork, Martin came over to me. "You know, our contract here ends next week." "Time flies. I nearly forgot. Feels like we've been here forever." "Yep, they'll be demolishing the place real soon." A sudden and unexpected pang of sadness hit me. Despite these weird and often unsettling encounters, the station and its residents had grown on me. "Do you think when they tear it down, they'll be gone?" I asked. "Who will be gone?" he started. "Oh, the people you've been seeing. Look, I've given some thought about what we've talked about here, and to be honest with you, I think I might be coming around to the idea that these folks don't belong here, and I don't mean the place, but the time. And to answer your question, I think they will be gone." On my final night, I took one last walk through the station. I actually felt nostalgic for it. In the main hall, I paused for a while, listening. And I swear, I could hear the distant whistle of a train and what sounded like the murmur of a crowd, but only for a moment. Like that, it was gone. Leaving the station that morning felt like waking from a dream. A week later, I drove by the place, and it had already been demolished. A new commercial complex was set to take its place. I remember everything I saw while working there. and I'll never forget a single person I encountered. Whoever they are, whoever they were. I hope they caught their train on time, and that they now rest peacefully. Lost in the Halls, from 13th Vanguard. After a very nasty divorce in the mid-2010s, I was left in debt, owing more money than I did before, and required better pay than the job I had at the time. I soon took a job as a security guard. I would be working nights at this old government property. It was just enough money, and the job sounded easy. The building there was a massive concrete labyrinth, long abandoned, and God knows what they were wanting to do with it. One rainy evening, the power flickered as I began my patrol. I was notified that this would happen with inclement weather. So the halls were dimly lit, and the place had an eerie vibe. But that night felt different than my usual nights so far. I walked past the usual checkpoints when I found a corridor to my left that I didn't recall seeing before. It was odd. I'd been working there for months by then and knew the layout like the back of my hand. Curious, I shone my flashlight down the hallway. It seemed like the beam never reached the end, but there were doors lining both sides, all closed, of course. I decided to check it out. Maybe it was an old wing I'd overlooked and wasn't told about. The air was cold as I stepped in, and the hum of the building seemed to fade away as I went on. The echo of my footsteps seemed unnatural, because the sound of the echo seemed to stretch out into the hallway for much longer than it should have. I tried one of the doors on the side. Locked. So were the next few when I tried them. As I moved further along, I realized the corridor seemed to stretch on without end. It had to be impossible, right? There's no such thing as never-ending hallways, never-ending anything. I turned around at one point, expecting to see the entrance I'd come through, but it was just more hallway behind me. In that moment, my stomach turned. I picked up the pace, walking quickly back the way I came. Several minutes later, the hallway kept going, and I was beginning to panic. So I pulled out my phone, calling my supervisor, but they didn't pick up. I called over and over again, but there was no answer. I was left there in suffocating silence. I began to try the doors again as I went along, pounding on them, hoping someone within would open the door and help me out. I told myself to stay calm. There had to be an explanation here. Buildings like this could be disorienting after all. Maybe I got turned around. Maybe some sort of optical illusion had me turn a corner that I didn't see. I left a mark on the wall with my pen, a small X, and I walked forward. After a few minutes, I saw the same X staring right back at me. That made no sense whatsoever. I repeated the process, this time leaving a trail of marks every few feet. But no matter how far I walked, I kept coming back to the same spot. When I looked at my watch, hours had passed. I was exhausted. I sank to the floor trying to gather my thoughts, praying to God that I had not lost my mind. As I sat there, I began to hear a whispering sound. It grew louder steadily. I couldn't make out any words, but the tone seemed urgent, almost pleading. "Hello?" I prayed for an answer. The moment I said that, the whispers stopped, and the silence was even creepier than before. I watched, terrified, as a door in front of me creaked open. A sliver of light spilled out. With no other options, completely desperate, I stood up and approached the open doorway. I peered inside first. I saw a small room, empty save for a single chair facing a window. Outside the window was nothing but darkness. I carefully stepped in, shutting the door behind me as if the hallway outside was a monster that I did not want to return to. That's when I heard more whispering. They grew louder and louder until my vision began to blur and eventually go black. I awoke to the sound of my radio crackling to life. "You okay? Your shift ended an hour ago. Where are you?" I was lying on the floor of the main lobby. Morning light filtered through the grimy windows. I was disoriented and got to my feet. I grabbed the radio and responded. I'm here." "Well, hurry it up. Replacement's here." I got my stuff and left the place without looking back. As I drove away, I glanced in the rear view. The once boring-looking building now filled me with utter dread. When I got home, I called in and told them I wouldn't be going back to that place, that they could either fire me or send me somewhere else. And, as fate would have it, they fired me. But I didn't care. I wasn't going back. If you ever come across an abandoned government building in the Northwest, just leave it alone. Another Me. From Not Well Anymore. Back in 2015, I took a job as a night security guard at an old radio broadcasting station, which was nestled on the outskirts of a small town in Maine. The station, once a hub of activity, had been shut down for years due to budget cuts and the rise of digital media. The building was a relic now, albeit a 2-story brick relic with a towering antenna that still scraped the sky. I was 28 years old, looking for steady work after a stint in the military. And I found it. It was an easy job too. I would just be keeping an eye on the place. My biggest threat, apparently, was just curious teenagers. The company planned to sell the place eventually, but until then, they wanted someone to watch over it. My shifts were solitary, and I didn't mind that. The quiet nights let me read or think about life, and the pay was pretty decent. At 8 p.m. I would arrive, make my rounds every couple of hours, and spend the rest of my time in a small security room near the front entrance. It wasn't initially a security room. From the looks of it, it was like an old break room. One cold November night, I settled into the office with a thermos of coffee and a good book. The wind was howling outside that night. Pretty rough stuff. It was rattling the loose window panes. Around midnight, I decided to do my rounds. The station's interior was a bit confusing, sort of a labyrinth of hallways and studios, filled with outdated equipment covered in dust. I was a bit surprised that most of it hadn't been stolen yet at this point. As I walked through the main corridor, my footsteps echoed off the linoleum floor. Everything was as it should be. Returning to the office, I set my flashlight down and continued my reading. About an hour later, a burst of static erupted from the device. I jumped, startled at the noise. "Hello?" A voice crackled through. Faint at first, barely audible. I picked up the walkie-talkie. "This is the security office. Who am I talking to?" Silence. Probably some interference, I thought. Old equipment can be unpredictable. I set it back down, but a few minutes later the static returned, followed by the same voice, clearer this time. "Is anyone there? I need help." I raised the walkie-talkie to my ear. "This is the security guard. Who is this?" "Oh, thank God. I'm trapped inside the station. Please, I need your assistance," the voice said, sounding strained. A trespasser from the sounds of it. "Sir, the building is closed. How did you get in here?" There was a pause. "I work here. Look, I don't have time to explain. Something is wrong, and I need your help." I frowned. "You work here? The station's been shut down for years now." "Please, can you come to Studio B?" I was suspicious now. Studio B was on the second floor, unused and locked last I checked. "What is your name?" "Not well anymore. What about you?" I froze. He had the same name as me? Look, are you messing with me? Who is this really? I demanded.
I don't know what's happening, but you have to listen to me. Everything is different. I'm stuck, and I need you to help me.
I was freaked out and a bit angry. This had to be some kind of prank. Maybe someone was messing with me, but how did they get my name? Was it someone I knew? I played along. Stay where you are, I'm coming up. I made my way up the stairwell with my flashlight. Each step creaked under my weight. I reached the second floor, headed towards Studio B. The door was shut just as I'd left it earlier. I tried the handle, and just like I thought, it was locked. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. Nothing. I raised the walkie-talkie. I'm outside Studio B and the door's locked.
I think I hear you outside. The door's not locked. I'll open it right now.
The handle in my hand remained motionless. The door never budged. It's not opening, I said.
What do you mean? I'm looking right at you.
He replied. A chill ran down my spine, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I don't see anyone.
Please, don't leave me here.
He was begging now. If this was a prank, he was a really good actor, and his impression of me was uncanny. I stepped back, trying to make sense of it. What's the last thing you remember? Before you got stuck, whatever that means.
I was finishing my shift. Then everything went dark. When I came to, the station looked old, abandoned. I tried calling out, but no one answered. Then I found this walkie-talkie.
What date is it?
November 12th, 2015.
That's today.
Of course it is. Are you sure you're in the same building as me?
Without saying anything, I was completely sure of that. There were no other radio broadcast stations out here. Nothing close enough for my walkie-talkie to pick up on. This doesn't make any sense.
You're telling me, but you're the only person I've heard from. Can you help me?
I considered my options. This was either the most elaborate prank possible, or he was telling the truth. But that would mean, impossibly, I was communicating with another version of myself that was somehow in the same place, but not here. If that was true, then what could I even do? I still offered. All right then, how can I help you?
There's a maintenance room in the basement. I think we might be able to reset this.
Reset this? I didn't even ask. I hesitated. The basement was a place I avoided. It was a cluttered storage area filled with old equipment and a lingering musty smell. All right then, I'll go down.
Thank you. I'll meet you there.
I didn't question how he intended to meet me if we were in different places. At this point, nothing seemed to make sense. I made my way down the stairs, heading to the basement access door. It groaned when I pushed it open. The air was damp and the faint hum of electrical equipment filled the space. Navigating between the stacks of boxes and tangled cords, I found the maintenance panel. It was an old electrical board covered in dust. I'm in the basement, in front of the main panel.
Great. There should be a main switch labeled auxiliary power. Maybe if we both flip it at the same time, it can synchronize things.
I rolled my eyes. Okay then, I see it.
On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
We both flipped our switches. The lights flickered, and for a moment I thought I heard footsteps. Did anything happen? I asked. No reply. Hello? Are you there? No response. I tried the switch again, but nothing happened. The lights stabilized, and a feeling of disappointment and strange sadness overwhelmed me. I tried to bury it down and headed back upstairs. Maybe I'd fallen for the prank after all. As I entered the main corridor, I noticed something odd. The air smelled a bit fresher, and before I could make it back to the security room, a sudden sharp pain shot through my head. When I opened my eyes again, I was on the floor. I'd apparently passed out, and my head was pounding. I checked for bleeding on my scalp, but it was dry. Once again, the air smelled stale. My walkie-talkie crackled to life. I heard a voice, weak and distant like the first time.
Thank you.
"Wait!" I shouted. "What happened on your end? Are you okay? Were you messing with me?" But there was only static. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, trying to rationalize this. I debated telling my supervisor or someone in my family, to confide the tale in someone. But ultimately I decided against it. This podcast of yours is one of the best ways to do it, because now I can tell someone and remain anonymous. I've bottled this up and kept it down in my personal life. It was the most bizarre and creepy thing that's ever happened to me. What do you think? Was I talking to an alternate version of myself? A copy of me in a different world who needed help? Or was it a bizarre, elaborate, and efficient prank from someone I didn't even know? I don't miss that summer camp. From Leroy M. As a kid who loved going to summer camp, I always thought that working at one would be a dream job. One day, that dream finally became reality in the most disappointing way. Instead of being a summer camp employee, I was a security guard at an old summer camp in northern Minnesota. This place had been shut down for a while, left to the elements, and in most places, it was encroached on and overgrown by forest. There had apparently been some problems with vagrants, which is why the position opened up a couple years back. I was apparently the third security guard to work here, and no, nothing suspicious was reported by them. They just went on to do their own things. The first time I saw the place, it looked like any other abandoned campsite. The cabins were peeling paint, the mess hall had broken windows all over, and there was a dock stretching out over a still, dark lake. The pine trees there were quite dense, and the underbrush had started to reclaim the open spaces where children probably once played. I felt a bit sad looking at it, reminded of all my days back in the summer camps I went to. Twice a day I would patrol. If I saw anything out of place, I would report the issues. They didn't have anything set up for an office. They told me to just settle into one of the least dilapidated cabins and make myself cozy. Over the first couple of weeks I was there, I fixed my cabin up enough to be livable. Even got a small generator for basic electricity, after asking my supervisor, of course. The first month was uneventful. Days were filled with the sounds of nature, and I loved it. At night, the stars were vivid, untouched by the lights of the city. Crazy having a job that was almost therapeutic. But then things started to feel off. One morning, I found footprints near the edge of the camp. These were larger than any animal tracks I'd ever seen. They seemed stretched out, with what looked like 4 toes ending in sharp points. I had some of my own wildlife books, but nothing in them or in my Google searches matched what I saw. I took some pictures, tried to compare them online, but found nothing conclusive. Unfortunately, they were on an old phone that I have long since gotten rid of. A few days later, while on my evening patrol, I noticed claw marks on several trees along the main trail. The gouges were deep, and some were even 8 feet high. Bears do scratch trees, but these marks seemed different, with the points spaced wider apart. It kinda creeped me out to the point where, during my rounds, I felt a little uneasy. Maybe I was thinking about it too much, but it made me feel watched. Sometimes I would hear rustling in the bushes, but when I'd shine my flashlight, I wouldn't see anything there. One night, as I was preparing to turn in, I heard a sound echoing across the lake. It was a low, mournful wail, and it sent chills down my spine. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or the cry of a coyote. It wasn't like an animal call that I recognized. In fact, it sounded almost human. I told myself it was the wind, or some distant, weird animal cry. Maybe some small mammal accidentally got hurt and let out a weird sound. You know, like you do when you stub your toe on the coffee table. However, the sound would come again and again over the next few nights, always around the same time and always coming closer. One evening, I decided to stay up, see if I could pinpoint the source. I sat on the porch of my cabin, flashlight in hand, listening closely. The forest was unusually quiet, as if all the creatures were hiding. Around midnight, the wail began again. This time it was coming from within the camp itself, closer than ever before. I stood up and I scanned the area with my torch. The beam caught a glimpse of movement between the trees. A tall figure, just slipping behind a cabin. "Hey!" I called out. There was no response. I gathered my courage and decided to go check it out. I made sure I had my utility belt. It had a knife and a whistle on it, the only weapons I had. I walked cautiously towards where I'd seen the figure. The ground was covered in dry leaves, and every step I made seemed way too loud. As I drew closer to that cabin, I noticed more of those strange footprints leading around the back. I followed them, honestly terrified. Turning the corner, I saw that the back door was open. The cabin had been locked since I'd arrived, so how it got opened, I have no idea. I pushed it open wider. The inside was dark. I shone the flashlight around. The interior looked fine, but a sudden thump upstairs made me jump. It sounded like a heavy footstep. I hesitated, but I had to figure out who was in there. I took the stairs one at a time, trying to be as quiet as possible. The hallway at the top was narrow, with doors on either side. The door at the far end was slightly open, and I could see a light flickering inside. When I made it there, the wailing inside began. It was softer now, but even more eerie, like a low whisper. Pushing the door open, I found an empty room, with a single window overlooking the lake. The flickering light was coming from a candle on the windowsill, though I had not lit any candles. I then saw a shadow move across the wall, but I didn't see anyone else in the room. Fear took over. I backed away and hurried down the stairs. As I reached the bottom, the front door slammed shut on its own. I rushed over, yanked it open, and ran right back to my cabin, locking the door behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the corner instead, holding my flashlight, listening to every creak and groan. Hours passed, and just before dawn, exhaustion took me. The next morning, I wondered about what I'd experienced. Was it a combination of isolation, overactive imagination, and exhaustion? I took the day off from patrolling and stayed near the cabin. Around midday, I heard splashing from the lake. Looking out, I saw these ripples forming, but there was nothing visible on the surface. But then I saw something emerge, a figure rising slowly from the water. It looked almost human, but taller and thinner. Its skin was pale and translucent, eyes large and dark. I was petrified. That creature stood in the shallow water, and it looked right at me. Then, with terrifying speed, it moved toward the shore. I panicked. Moving faster than I ever had before, I grabbed my keys and jumped into my truck, starting the engine. I sped away from the camp, glancing in the rearview mirror. That thing was standing at the edge of the tree line, watching me still. I drove straight to the nearest town, and I went to the local sheriff's office. I told them that someone was trespassing on the property and described what I saw, leaving out the most unbelievable details. An officer agreed to check it out, but I waited back in town, too shaken to go back there. A couple of hours later, the officer called me.
Didn't find anyone. No signs of trespassing. Are you sure you saw somebody?
I know I did. There were footprints and marks on the trees.
Could be the wildlife. There are bears and wolves around here.
I didn't argue further, even though I knew he was wrong. I contacted the property owners and informed them that I wouldn't be going back. They were frustrated, but didn't press me for reasons. Before leaving town, I stopped at a diner for a meal. The older waitress must have been bored, because she kept trying to strike up a conversation. Eventually, she asked, "You're not from around here, are you?" Truthfully, no. I was, working at the old camp by the lake. You were out there alone? Yeah. Why? I guess you haven't heard, but that place has stories. Folks around here avoid it. What kind of stories? Might sound a little crazy, but there are old legends about spirits in the woods there. They say something in that lake watches over the land, something that's not human. I swallowed hard. Have you, ever seen anything? Not me, but my grandfather used to tell me stories about things that didn't take kindly to trespassers. I didn't share my experience with her. I thanked her for the meal and the conversation, and I left. I've put this experience behind me, and I won't be asking any more questions. I want a normal, boring life, not something filled with supernatural terror or nonsense. I was lucky to get out of there when I did. Thanks for tuning in to Tales from the Break Room, the home of the scariest true work stories. If you want to hear your story narrated by me, send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. We pay 5 cents per word for accepted stories. Help us grow by leaving Tales from the Break Room a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. Check out eeriecast.com or search for EerieCast on those very same podcast apps to see our other exciting and terrifying podcasts, like Unexplained Encounters, the other show I host, where I read stories with a focus on the supernatural. To get some merch, go to eeriecast.store. And to unlock ad-free episodes of your favorite EerieCast shows and exclusive audiobooks, go to eeriecast.com/plus and consider signing up for EerieCast Plus. You can follow me on Twitter, I guess it's X now, @DarkPrevails. You can also subscribe to me on YouTube, where I deliver the same content. Just look for Darkness Prevails. Good night. I hope we can share another break sometime soon.